So the floor is open. I'll take maybe 3-4 questions to begin with. Keep them short. We'll get the microphone to you, and I'll begin with this side of the room. So if there's nobody there, of course. No, there is that structure in place. Okay, right in the back. Let me bring that back in. Right, can you stand it, please? Yeah. And the next person, if they can see their question around the okay, so that's right. Yeah, okay. So please go ahead.
Thank you for a very
Olivia, stay where you are, right next to the next question.
short question. Yeah, so my question is also very fundamental in that sense that are cities desirable, in the sense that we know a lot of research has shown that for a very large segment of people, cities are exclusionary. So the whole teleological argument that cities are the ultimate spaces of evolution, of development in different senses. So do people want to be considered urban is something that has been a question.
So is development necessarily, not growth, but development, the emancipation of the human spirit, is that necessarily actually an urban phenomenon?
Right. So do people want to be associated as city dwellers, basically, or is it could be some other socio-spatial arrangement that they would perhaps.
That's a big question. Yes. Yes, Shivani, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shivani with the Housing and Land Rights Network. So congratulations for this great panel. I just had 2 comments, and when we're talking about research, I think apart from what we're researching, I also think is for who. And I think that's something as researchers we do need to question, who is our audience and what is the utility of that research. Are we just writing an academic paper, or are we really trying to change somebody's life with the research? And I think that really drives the kind of research that we do. And we're talking about cities, they're really about the relationships that people have with spaces, organizations, institutions, systems, and what is the voice of the people and who are the people. And Amita, you raised a very important point of how we see the urban with one lens. But I think the lens that drives the research is also really important. And coming from a human rights organization, working with the most marginalized, I feel that lens is not coming across very strongly. And how do we reconcile that with the research that we do?
Whose questions are we answering? Okay. Jayendra, right next to Chetan, and then I'll take it. Go ahead.
So my question is regarding the problem of urbanization, because most of the urban cities have reached the saturation point. The government has made a policy to make it smart cities, but the smart cities are not moving in such a pace they are made to. Because I come from Andhra Pradesh, and there also been ideated the construction of industrial corridor running through Kakinada, connecting to the Chennai. But even that is not happening. Why do you think? What is the reason?
So, Chetan, you want to? No, right. So that's 3, and then you have Olivia to bring it up with the nation. Yeah, and then
Dinesh Mohan. My question, the issue on why we are not collecting data, mapping, and why is research in silos. The question is, because when you ask that question, you have to ask why. The reason is because our institutions are silos. Once you say India will only have IITs, IIMs, AIMS, and now science department, so all institutions are silos. Why design? And the government has nothing. In my 35 years of work, there's not a single ministry which knows how to give research projects or evaluate research projects, or even read the reports. There's a 400-page. So how do you expect to change that?
So you have one champion in government.
I exactly understand what you're saying. And I'm trying to change that, okay? That is why I went down that path of argument, precisely because of this problem.
The point is that as long as we have transferable secretaries and joint secretaries of the It's a very serious issue. And then all the research has to come from very small NGOs. The point is that you have to have large groupings which the government understands and respects. You cannot document, you cannot do research if you can only get 6-month projects. I just got a call from the government to say in 6 months, please remove the congestion from Delhi. Now, the point is that we have to ask what research should be done and what institutions have to change. So what the answer is, how are cities in India different from other cities? The structures are completely different. Delhi is not one city.
Exactly.
There are 20 cities. Secondly, even the sprawling cities, why is the government not taking use of our own census data that our travel distances are very short? The census data shows 50% people don't use vehicles. Why do we in India not call our three-wheeler transport, which is in all the cities, and so on and so forth? So therefore, we have to answer these questions, and they're not easy to answer. For example, every district headquarters in India is the apartheid city. It's the old city, then the white city, which is called the cantonment or civil lines, then the rest of the city which built around them. So how will these work? Why are these different? You raise the issue of Chandigarh. Chandigarh, why is it a disaster? Why is Britain's Delhi a disaster? Why is Chandigarh a disaster as cities go? All, whether it's Greater Noida or all the cities being built in India, will never ever be able to have public transport. Not possible unless you change the structure.
We will have that.
So you will have to. We have to. What institutions do you think should be established to change this? And everyone who does research in a silo because they're just dedicated. No one asking them to do it.
It's essential for you.
I have to Peter, why not have a rural research?
You can just introduce yourself.
Dr. Sanjeev, why we are so much crazy for urban research? Why we hate rural people or village people? The very short they have cattle and goats. How can we live without village people? They are providing food, drink and everything. We are totally dependent on them. So let us have a very clear picture. It cannot be, you cannot have 100% urban. If we are going to 100% urban, nobody can live in this world. So let us try to be.
That's an interesting question because fundamentally, just 3% of the population of the US actually does produce all the food, and there is in agriculture all over the place. It has become almost entirely people-less, and we're fast moving to where industry will also become people-less. So what will people do? Forget about the is I think going to be a major question. But so let's take this round of questions and then
Do you want to answer one?
let me begin.
Which one?
So whoever wants to take a stab at the answer, please. Yeah, Kaveri, you seem to be ready to go.
Thank you, the mic
Yeah.
is what's management.
Yes, well,
Give me this one to be
yes.
On whether city life has to be an answer. I think, we are just naming all such, sort of, but I think it's a kind of a Harris to Taro world, right? Where people move to the city in expectation of a certain wage and they are not getting it. And having said which, I think the quality of the air and everything, and certainly personally, I would like to move to Bhutan or somewhere else. So we are also going to see an exodus of the middle and upper classes in a kind of a Hirschman exit to go out to somewhere in the mountains and try and set up a research institute there, which brings us to the second question. And this question of silos, completely correct, Dinesh is. So social science is under attack across universities in India today in a way that it's never been before. So not only were we siloed to begin with, but the attack that is going on is partly because there are very uncomfortable questions raised. And the reason I talked about capitalism is because the flow of money, speculation we heard from two or more, is where the story is at. So obviously the social science community, and on the other side, when you talk about any kind of integration with the hard sciences, even the water departments on the government side, you have urban Swachh Bharat, rural Swachh Bharat, different, they are not talking to each other, and they are certainly still not talking at any scale to social scientists, whether it's water, waste, or any other kind of, So I think that problem, and it's much more significant at the government end because that's where the money's at and that's where the policy power is at. And even today in the crony capitalism setup, that's where all the action is at insofar as land contracts and all. So I think there's a very kind of an easy answer to that one. And I agree that people are carrying on doing their siloed research for the pure love of it.
Just two points to share. Sarah Kotikunda was one of our earlier, third or fourth speaker last city. Actually after quit and went to Goa. And that's where he lives now. Occasionally commutes to Mumbai to teach at the IIT. And so there are people who are with that, is one thing. But the second is social science is one thing. I increasingly get the sense, partly from what Dinesh is saying, that you need to bring science to work with social sciences. Right? Olivia's work, which essentially we started off looking to find out why do really posh colonies in Delhi have dengue when there was supposed to be one or two mosquitoes, essentially involved tracking intra-city migration flows. And if I remember right, it was quite a half I learned that he was actually testing the DNA of the mosquito to figure out it was actually Sanjeev who infected you. And the other way around, right? So which is pretty high science. We were working with the Institute Pasteur. So is that even going to be feasible in this country? Are we, or any country in this part? I don't know whether, and you're seeing any work that is bringing together science and all the smart city stuff that we see now with huge control rooms and goodness knows what else. Is that kind of stuff that we are actually, is there any hope of this kind of stuff happening?
No.
So let's figure out why it's
How this is only mic that works, so that's not live. Yeah. It should work now.
Yeah, I was just saying that we are also organized as silo, so maybe no. We try to fight against silo inside AFD because cities are organized as silo. Ministry are, even in France, are organized as silo, so we also organize as silo. It's exactly what you just said. So we are looking for transversality, and it's very difficult in terms of organization to organize transversality between different disciplines, between different experts. But what I can tell you is when you have a transport expert, an urban expert, and a housing expert looking at a project, well, that's very interesting. So we need to work with that. That's true, that's for sure. And in cities, when we try to organize transversality, for example, through climate change, fight strategy, when people speak to other people and try and start to work together, it is very interesting as well. But the organization cannot, well, always resist on that. So the last thing that in France also gives a little bit of transversality inside cities is the urban renewal. We have to look at the deprived area in France as well. And to be able to renew those deprived areas, you have to work urban and then works and then different departments. And there's a way of organizing it so that it's working, but it's very, very difficult. Did I see any research that is not organized in silo? I saw anthropologic research a long time ago. It was not urban, with archaeology, with history, and it was tremendously interesting. So, I mean, it exists, but yeah, it's a hard thing. Yeah.
So, I'm going to come to the end of this thing. Tell us what your struggle is. Because obviously you are struggling to sort of overcome these things. Before that, I mean, your school is called the School of Habitats. It sort of makes one feel that it is very inclusive, very transverse, everybody else. Is it really? I mean, have you been able to succeed in getting that?
Okay, I see one student here. So, so I would actually like Kanchi to also respond. Kanchi to respond on this. But at the same time, I do think we have tried to struggle with this question of silos. So within our Center of Urban Policy, we have people who are architects, we are economists, me who comes from social work, which itself is like a hodgepodge kind of a mixture of social sciences and development studies. We have people who come from critical planning and mainstream planning, and we have engineers. What would I say? We have made conscious efforts to work together and actually undertake teamed research. Okay, and this has been difficult in the initial days. It's been much more exciting as we have moved on. But what we also realize is that within the Habitat School, there are different versions of interdisciplinarity. And which is why I said, and I talked to you, Sanjeev, that when I hear and when I've heard presentations about the new emergent form of urban science, it assumes that there is a certain form in which interdisciplinarity will happen. So there is ideology-driven interdisciplinarity, which is, I think, there is a structure or pre-theoretical, I would say, assumption which makes things come together. I think there are also more unpredictable kind of models. Sometimes only social sciences coming together, sometimes the spatial and the geographical kind of ruling a roost. When we start focusing on material systems, like thinking about really water supply, sanitation, I think this is where perhaps, I mean, at least in my experience, social sciences can prove and give a very interesting critical insight into how processes work, how relations between the material and the social are actually constructed, how there are different forms of organizing these infrastructure systems itself. Okay? And they help in some ways to contest and also work with an engineering mindset which will decide that to run a water pipeline, you require a minimum of this amount of distance, this kind of stability to the structure. And I think these are interesting contestations. Within the arena of transport itself, there is not a lot of research that we have done on transport in India, but wherever we have attempted, it's been much more from the social science angles. It's not, we have not had a transportation engineer or a transportation economist. But my students, we have first had one transportation planner. And what we experienced is that the transportation planner only knows the PCU and then how does one work out models there. There are transportation designers who will only look at micro designs of streets, and each of these disciplines, mind you, believes itself to also be an interdisciplinary kind of subject. So therefore I feel versions of interdisciplinarity exist, and to me there is a space for all of this currently in India, and there should be a space for all of this, just as I think there is also a need for large groups working across silos. So I don't really see the point just now of only saying there should be this kind of research. In fact, I think that is an anathema. And when I look at research, I don't see the point of all research only to be education and only to be experimentation. I think research functions and the way it contributes to society, there are so many multiple ways in which one has to locate research. And I think currently, to me, I completely agree with Kaveri. I think the most dangerous thing that we are doing is that we are disallowing any critical voice to emerge. Any social science, and social science because it is particularly critical. And we have not been able to mature ourselves as a society to see that from critique, there is some kind of construction and constructivism that emerges. We are.
Is there a good dialectic process?
Yes.
I know that. So, I'm going to go back to the audience for 3 questions, if at all. And then, I'll only take them from people who have not yet crossed the.
It's a veteran. Apart from this.
That's good. You are the back.
So let me, I can see, okay, so since Sakshi was asked upon by a teacher to ask a question, I suppose that.
Yeah, very short, yeah, please.
It can be a common question. I'll go back to the panel for 1 minute replies across the board. So, yes. Quick, yes.
He is a very veteran engineer.
You have to have that defense on that. Yes, go ahead. And keep it.
Yeah,
yes.
very short. So I happen to be Amita Ma'am's student from the Habitat Studies, and I'm an urban policy postgraduate who's also an engineer by training. And coming back to the point that how much we lay emphasis on planning, because urbanism is so dynamic, we also have to start thinking about policy. But we started with Partha's comment on big data and how it is going to impact. So what kind of data do we first try to even collect in the first place? If we don't want siloed studies, we need to answer the question, who are we doing this research for? But the data, the big data, because there is also going to be a data policy now. So we have to clarify the purpose we collect data for, even in the social space now. Probably, I don't know. So this is very important. Like, we also start thinking about policy, because policy is for something very dynamic, and planning, maybe you pre-plan things.
So what data should we be collecting?
Yes.
Supreme Court will us tomorrow. We can. That is a different story, right?
Yes, thank you.
So I was just wondering that we didn't really speak about politics here, people's politics, as if cities are dead, politically.
I thought there was a lot of politics happening.
Yes, I mean, it seems like Sanjeev was fighting, in a way, but cities like Delhi had metro system, but fares are increased, then you don't really have people's representation. Jaipur maybe doesn't need metro, but has metro. So, I mean, are cities for people, or are cities for concrete structures? How do we look at that?
Good. Let me.
I want to talk, which nobody has talked about.
I shall give you exactly a minute. And I'll break my.
We are talking of the future. What is that future? That is 2050. How many people think of that? How much will be the population at that time, and how much will be in urban area, how much in other services, like services, industries, and other. That is how you have to integrate and think of it in wholeheartedly. The fact is that the land and water are limited. Forests have to be saved, hills have to be saved because of environment. Unless you think of that, the urban area doesn't carry alone. You have to think of those. People have to live in urban areas. What are the things? Some of the things have already been mentioned. Water, there are 60% people depending on rural area, on agriculture, which has to be reduced. And 300 more million will be coming. So think of all those when you think of urban area.
Exactly. I sort of went back 32 years. You're going back, and I was looking at it in '86, when I was talking about cities differently than I'm talking now. And
We can give you the solutions if you want.
so let me. Is this the microphone which works?
Yeah, it is.
So let me begin in the exact order in which I started. So first, Asim, a minute. Any closing thoughts, including the fact, as you said, reinforcing your strong claim that research is rubbish? You do research rubbish.
No, I do a lot of research myself. I didn't mean it that way, but I think about cities. Perhaps one important thing would be maybe a decentralized approach. Like, I'll give you a very short example. There's one old lady in my apartment complex who insisted that we have to do segregation of garbage in our complex. We have about 200 apartments in our complex. And just that single person managed to reduce the waste going out of our apartment complex by, I would say, 65%. Because now we had because we also have a big garden, so it was being composted with the leaf litter, etc. And the dry waste was so clean that it became actually a resource for the recycling, for the waste pickers to sell and make more money. So I think a smaller, more decentralized things are interesting because, again, going back, I think our topography and sociology also of different places is very particular, and if things develop with keeping those things in mind, then probably more sensitive sort of development can happen.
Small can be very useful and more important things. Kaveri,
Yeah. So I think the small is beautiful concept, but I think more that when I think of a dystopian future, and I don't know about all this digital India and all, also to me, my ATM card often doesn't work even in Khan Market. So if that comes to pass, though, I'm checking out. I think like China, if we reach certain level, are we really going to value what the gentleman here said, but what the, nature, other sorts of things, other sorts of considerations. And of course, I think we just need many more researchers and of all kinds, including, I would say, like Bollywood and other people representing.
Well, I'll say that I'm pleased that I managed to break all silos. And I get everybody to agree that this siloed approach to doing this is a bad idea. I agree with a gentleman here who mentioned that, we have this very siloed approach for a variety of reasons, historically, in the way administration is done, how research is given out and funded, etc. And I fully agree with you, and that is precisely why I was arguing right from the beginning that there is a problem about going about it this way. But let me defend the engineers and scientists, despite being a social scientist myself. I actually interact with a lot of people in different fields. I write history books, I do research in cities, but also in environmental issues. I work on finance. So in my personal life, break silos and I meet people on different things. I have to say the engineers and scientists are usually more open to social science ideas than the other way around, in my experience at least. So the IITs, for example, do have social science departments, and you'll find engineers go and attend economics and other classes. Not too many places where you'll find a sociology department where they learn physics.
No, I do think it's difficult, but in my experience, it is very much possible. It adds a lot of value. So we have physicists, we have mathematicians, and often we don't agree with each other, but I do think it does add value. But the one thing that I want to say is that we just don't have an ecology which respects knowledge. And I'm tempted to give one small example. For about 2 years, I was part of a 5-member technical expert group advising the Mumbai Municipal Corporation on solid waste management. Okay, and the experience was great. Okay, great in terms of learning that no knowledge counts. There were 3 IIT engineers, 2 coming from civil engineering, 1 coming from environmental engineering. Me, as they had to have, perhaps I fulfilled both the gender dimension and the social science dimension. So 1 person from social sciences, and they had 1 person who is a eco-scientist, someone who had worked in BRC for a very long time and pioneered models of recycling and biogas creation, and 1 legal expert. We realized, I think, around after 3 to 4 meetings, that the sole purpose of having a technical expert committee was for every court case which was being slapped upon the BMC because it was not able to shift from the Devnar dumping ground. So this, yes, we are taking the advice. This is in process, okay? Yes, but there is not a single piece of advice from anyone. So no knowledge counted for this ecosystem. And I think that is something that we really need to be concerned about.
She asks about the big data and how we're going to really do the research. I say that we started connecting people as well as we started connecting lands. I think the moment these interactions and connectivity takes place, I think you will see the future research will be having much more empirical and scientific outcome. Yeah.
Three words. I would say maybe to break silo, we should rather work a lot on integrated fight against climate change inside a city strategy, if people listen, of course. And it caters for the answer.
And with the gentleman here, if you want to have water and air, then that may be one way of going over it.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. It's not finished yet, please. 2 points. The first one is that the cloud has not didn't do the cloud works and the analysis. We have to give back to César what belongs to him. It's Jean-Thomas Martelly who is here who did the analysis. Thank you, everyone. I will just bring the material. Finally, I would like to invite our scientific and cultural attaché at the French Embassy Consulate to do the concluding remarks. Thank you. Please take this mic, yes.
Whatever mic, actually, I don't really need a mic, but first of all, thanks a lot for CPR, chère Marie-Hélène, and our Center for Human Sciences, which is also social sciences, by the way, for having organized that extremely important discussion about the future urban. Also, congratulations to the distinguished speakers. I heard some of your points. So that gives me actually the very good introduction for my next point, is be optimistic. As some of you may be aware, we just organized the previous, from November to March, the 3rd edition of Bonjour India, which deliberately focused on those issues. We created some talks about what we call the other city. We had projects around the waste management, and we focused a lot, including with physicists, mathematicians, and engineers, about urban mobility and renewable energies, because those two, as we all know, are completely linked. We organized the first Knowledge Summit, which took place in Delhi in March, when the French president was visiting. We'll organize the second one in France next year, then hopefully one every year. The outcome of the 6 panels of our 6 main topics, including the 2 I just mentioned, from those incredible professors in physics, maths, biochemistry, and so forth, is we cannot do anything if we don't have a social science component. And both the Indian and the French researchers said that extremely clearly, and not to me, but to Minister Javadkar and to Minister Vidal, who is our Minister for Higher Education, Research and Innovation. So the political message was also given. So now we are going on, and actually what Marie-Hélène and Nicolas and all of you are doing tonight is extremely important for us, because we do focus a lot on the urban issue in India, not because we have lessons to teach, but because by the sheer fact that between 300 million to 400 million Indians will soon live in cities where they are not yet living. What will happen in India will affect the rest of the world. Definitively, as we all know, our societies are completely linked today, and when someone is throwing a dustbin somewhere, it affects the ecosphere all around this planet, which is so fragile. So we will go on. We have created a program called Sustainability. The word, I think, says everything, which wants to connect research, including from social and human fields, and I'm myself a human scientist, as we don't say in French, because that will look very arrogant, and enterprises, because we feel that enterprises need and are more and more looking for the solutions, and I think what CPR is doing is exactly on that point, and I'm sure that CSH will follow quite quickly. And of course, researchers, engineers, who now feel that you cannot build a urban network transportation if you don't need the way it will be used by citizens. And I think that is quite clear. I totally understood. Maybe there is no knowledge coming out. 3 engineers and 2 social scientists meeting in Mumbai. But even with the government of Maharashtra, we just signed an agreement focusing on the human value in the urban management. Let me remind you that we also are supporting 3 smart cities in India. you have to do the same symposium in Puducherry, not because it's Pondicherry, because this is probably where we have the best unit working on a smart city, which is completely focusing on the city itself, its heritage, and the way citizens can actually have a better life, better waste management, better transportation management, all the issues that you delve today. So we are completely focused on that. Our ambassador keep telling everybody in France, look at India and look at this issue. So please do go on. We'll work with the organizers about how to connect, maybe not all of you because you're not by yourself enough, Kabina hi kafi hai, but maybe 2,000 or 3,000 scholars, but more important, how to connect you with the other more scientist field. So be ready to be invited by us, either by small groups or and for those of you who would like to go to France to see the way we miserably failed during years before finally understanding that maybe giving one ticket to someone living in the countryside for he or she to reach the center of a city, and those kind of experiences might be also very interesting, and I'm perfectly open to do that. I unfortunately have to leave you here because I have to deliver the same message to 4 French senators who are visiting India today, not on this issue, on another issue, but that's not a problem. And I hope that you had a very good day, and I encourage you to meet again. Actually, we should have those kind of panel discussion at least every month, because we know the Indian taste for ADA, and we know the researcher taste for ADA, so Indian researchers taste for ADA is certainly the best. Thank you very much. Good.
Since this is the 104th. So
Good. Actually, I know because I'm following the program, but it's an encouragement for you to do more. And moving to other cities, go to Nagpur. Nagpur, now the project is to totally revitalize the water bridge, which is a complete waste in the pure sense of the term. And there are many, many, many other places to go. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Dhanyavad.
Thank you.
Sorry, and I forgot to mention that you're all invited outside. This is the gardens of the French knowledge campus in India, because you have the center here, you have the French lycée here, which is now open to Indian students, and you have, of course, the French Institute in India, which is completely devoted to you. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone for participating. Once again, thank you for coming here. It was, I think, very, very stimulating discussion.
There is a wonderful reception outside.
Yes, please join us outside.
You are invited.
Yes, the idea was to celebrate the fact that we had 100 seminars, and that I remind you that many of these seminars are online and have been filmed for many years. So this is the celebration starting. Please, people who are outside have already started. So please.